Chapter 11 of Sanditon by Jane Austen. It would not do. Not all that the whole Parker race could say among themselves could produce a happier catastrophe than that the family from Surrey and the family from Camberwell were one and the same. The rich West Indians and the young ladies' seminary had all entered Sanditon in those 2 hack chaises. The Mrs. Griffithses, who in her friend Mrs. Darling's hands had wavered as to coming and been unequal to the journey, was the very same Mrs. Griffithses whose plans were at the same period, under another representation, perfectly decided, and who was without fears or difficulties. All that had the appearance of incongruity in the reports of the 2 might very fairly be placed to the account of the vanity, the ignorance, or the blunders of the many engaged in the cause by the vigilance and caution of Miss Diana Parker. Her intimate friends must be officious like herself, and the subject had supplied letters and extracts and messages enough to make everything appear what it was not. Miss Diana probably felt a little awkward on being first obliged to admit her mistake. A long journey from Hampshire undertaken for nothing, a brother disappointed, an expensive house on her hands for a week must have been some of her immediate reflections, and much worse than all the rest must have been the sort of sensation of being less clear-sighted and infallible than she had believed herself. No part of it, however, seemed to trouble her long. There were so many to share in the shame and the blame that probably when she had divided out of her proper proportions to Mrs. Darling, Miss Caper, Fanny Noyce, Mrs. Charles Dupois, and Mrs. Charles Dupois and Mrs. Charles Dupois' neighbour, there might be a mere trifling of reproach remaining for herself. At any rate, she was seen all the following morning walking about after lodgings with Mrs. Griffiths as alert as ever. Mrs. Griffiths was a very well-behaved, genteel kind of woman, who supported herself by receiving such great girls and young ladies as wanted either masters for finishing their education or a home for beginning their displays. She had several more under her care than the 3 who were now come to Sanditon, but the others all happened to be absent. Of these 3, and indeed of all, Miss Lamb was beyond comparison the most important and precious, as she paid in proportion to her fortune. She was about 17, half mulatto, chilly and tender, had a maid of her own, was at the best room in the lodgings, and was also of the first consequence in every plan of Mrs. Griffiths's. The other girls, 2 Miss Beauforts, were just such young ladies as may be met with in at least 1 family out of 3 throughout the kingdom. They had tolerable complexions, showy figures, an upright decided carriage, and an assured look. They were very accomplished and very ignorant, their time being divided between such pursuits as might attract admiration and those labours and expedients of dexterous ingenuity, by which they could dress in a style much beyond what they ought to have afforded. They were some of the first in every change of fashion, and the object of all was to captivate some man or much better fortune than their own. Mrs. Griffiths had preferred a small retired place like Sanditon on Miss Lamb's account, and the Miss Beauforts, though naturally preferring anything to smallness and retirement, yet having in the course of the spring been involved in the inevitable expense of 6 new dresses each for a 3 days' visit, were constrained to be satisfied with Sanditon also, till their circumstances were retrieved. There, with the hire of a harp for one and the purchase of some drawing paper for the other, and all the finery they could already command, they meant to be very economical, very elegant, and very secluded, with the hope on Miss Beaufort's side of praise and celebrity from all who walked within the sound of her instrument, and on Miss Letitia's of curiosity and rapture in all who came near her while she sketched, and to both the consolation of meaning to be the most stylish girls in the place. The particular introduction of Mrs. Griffiths to Miss Diana Parker secured them immediately an acquaintance with the Trafalgar House family and with the Denhams, and the Miss Beauforts were soon satisfied with the circle in which they moved in Sanditon, to use a proper phrase, for everybody must now move in a circle, to the prevalence of which rotary motion is perhaps to be attributed the giddiness and false steps of many. Lady Denham had other motives for calling on Mrs. Griffiths besides attention to the Parkers. In Miss Lamb, here was the very young lady, sickly and rich, whom she had been asking for, and she made the acquaintance for Sir Edward's sake, and the sake of her milch asses. How it might answer with regard to the baronet remained to be proved, but as to the animals, she soon found that all her calculations of profit would be vain. Mrs. Griffiths would not allow Miss Lamb to have the smallest symptom of a decline, or any complaint which ass's milk could possibly relieve. Miss Lamb was under the constant care of an experienced physician, and his prescriptions must be their rule. And except in favour of some tonic pills, which a cousin of her own had property in, Mrs. Griffiths did never deviate from the strict medical page. The corner house of the terrace was the one in which Miss Diana Parker had the pleasure of settling her new friends, and considering that it commanded in front the favourite lounge of all the visitors at Sanditon, on the one side, whatever might be going on at the hotel, there could not have been a more favourable spot for the seclusions of the Miss Beauforts. And accordingly, long before they had suited themselves with an instrument or with drawing paper, they had, by the frequency of their appearance at the low windows upstairs, in order to close the blinds or open the blinds, to arrange a flower pot on the balcony, or look at nothing through a telescope, attracted many an eye upwards, and made many a gazer gaze again. A little novelty has a great effect in so small a place. The Miss Beauforts, who would have been nothing at Brighton, could not move here without notice, and even Mr. Arthur Parker, though little disposed for supernumerary exertion, always quitted the terrace in his way to his brother's by his corner house for the sake of a glimpse of the Miss Beauforts, though it was half a quarter a mile round about, and added 2 steps to the ascent of the hill. End of chapter 11.